If you really want to see pay for play, you have to look no further than Donald Trump and the Donald Trump Foundation. Excuse me. This story is not going to die, and there's going to be a federal investigation into bribery assertions between Donald Trump and Pam Bondi. She's gone into hiding recently and refuses to answer any questions at this point regarding her relationship with Donald Trump, i.e. that $25,000 check that she asked for that Donald Trump gave her, after which she decided not to investigate Trump U in Florida.
You want to debate foundations and charities? One candidate's family foundation has saved countless lives around the world. The other candidate's foundation took money other people gave to his charity and then bought a 6-foot-tall painting of himself.
Donald Trump reportedly used Trump Foundation charity money for a giant portrait of himself, along with a football helmet autographed by then Bronco quarterback Tim Tebow. Thanks to the Washington Post's methodical pursuit of Trump's charitable giving, these red flags, among others, have raised questions about the Trump Foundation and just where the money goes. Now, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has opened an inquiry.
My interest in this issue really is in my capacity as regulator of nonprofits in New York State, and we have been concerned that the Trump Foundation may have engaged in some impropriety from that point of view. We have been looking into the Trump Foundation to make sure it's compliant with the laws that govern charities in New York.
Schneiderman also filed a lawsuit against Trump University in 2013. That case is still ongoing. Meanwhile, House Democrats want the Justice Department to investigate the circumstances surrounding an unlawful $25,000 gift from the foundation to a PAC supporting Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. The Democrats allege that the payment may have influenced Bondi's decision not to investigate Trump University, a claim Bondi denies. And joining me now is David Fahrenthold, who is leading the Washington Post investigation into the Trump Foundation. And David, thank you so much for your great reporting and for being here. I want to read to you a little bit from your latest piece. You write that 3 of the mysteries in the files of the Donald J. Trump Foundation have been solved. You said, here's what we know. Trump campaign says he's given tens of millions to charity, but offers no details, no proof. And also how Donald Trump retools his charity to spend other people's money is one of your other headlines that you got out this week. What do we now know about the Donald J. Trump Foundation that we didn't know last week?
Well, we've learned a little bit more about how it operates. One of the things that we've seen in this week is the Trump campaign trying to sort of explain why they did these things, why there were errors in their tax returns, why they gave a political donation when there were rules against that, why after they gave that political donation, they then filed a false tax return that listed another fake donation in its place. And their answer seems to be that there were not a lot of good controls going on within the Trump Foundation. They often gave money out to groups without writing down what state the group was in. So sometimes they told the IRS it had gone to a different state. And that Donald Trump himself had signed the check that sent the improper donation from his foundation to Pam Bondi's group in Florida. And so the excuse was, well, people said, well, why does Donald Trump sign all the checks personally? They said, well, he does it because he wants to keep good track of all these checks. He wants to make sure there's no mistakes. Well, why didn't he catch this mistake? Well, he signs too many checks. So we've sort of learned a little bit more about how Donald Trump was keeping control of the money in the Trump Foundation, and it doesn't seem like there was a really impressive amount of control there.
All right, and now Mike Pence, Donald Trump's running mate, was asked about the foundation and about Donald Trump's charitable giving on CNN on Monday. Take a listen to what he said.
Anyone who knows about Donald Trump and his career knows that this is a man who's given away tens of millions of dollars to charitable causes throughout the course of his business. And you can talk to charities all across the country who have benefited by the generosity of the Trump family.
Now, you indeed have talked to charities across the country. You've actually compiled a list of charities who supposedly have benefited from the generosity of the Trump Foundation. What have you found in terms of how much money he's actually donated to these groups?
Well, it's important to know that the Trump Foundation itself, it sounds like it ought to be Donald Trump's money. That's the way wealthy people usually do it. If they set up a foundation with their own name on it, it's their money. In fact, Trump has not given any of his own money to that foundation since 2008, as far as we can tell. It said he gives away other people's money, sort of under the impression question that it's his money. So what I've been looking for is an actual donation out of Donald Trump's pocket. When did he give money out of his own pocket to any charity? And as you saw, Mike Pence says he gives away tens of millions of dollars. Well, I've now called 338 charities, the charities that seem closest to Donald Trump, and I found between 2008 and this May, when people started really looking at his charity, in that 8-year period, I found one gift for less than $10,000, and that was back in 2009. That's out of Donald Trump's pocket, just one gift.
Have you been able to find, and I'm sure his tax returns would actually give you a lot more detail. Have you gotten any response from the Trump campaign as to whether they will allow you to peruse maybe his tax records, which would tell you more?
No. I've also asked, just if they don't want to give his tax returns, if they just want to talk about his charitable donations. I mean, I've asked for this information in a number of forms, whatever form they're comfortable giving it in, and I haven't gotten any response in any form.
Have they given you any evidence that Donald Trump is being audited, meaning the letter that the IRS normally sends to you that proves you're being audited?
No, they have not.
And one other question before we turn to our other panelists, and we're going to keep you on as well. This portrait that Donald Trump supposedly purchased with someone else's charitable money, if that portrait, we understand, is being used to aggrandize his businesses or being used in his for-profit businesses, that actually would be an unlawful use of charitable donation. Have you been able to find this portrait? Do you know how it's being used?
I don't know how it's being used. We got a clue this week as to what happened right after it was purchased. Trump bought the thing with $20,000 of his foundation's money in 2007. And the key question is then, as you said, what happens next? Did he take that and somehow find a charitable use for a giant 6-foot-tall portrait of himself? Or did he put it up at his house or his business? If he put it up at his house or his business, that's against the law. So we talked to the assistant to the artist who made it, the guy who actually packed it up and shipped it. And he says he was told by Melania Trump, Trump's wife, to send it to Trump's golf course in Westchester County, New York, and the order from her, the explanation from her, was that it was going to hang in the employee boardroom. Well, if that was true, if it's still there, that's not permissible.
Yeah, and very quickly before we turn to the others, you were at this sort of bizarre infomercial billed as a press conference at the Trump Hotel in D.C. Were you able to walk around enough to look and see if maybe you saw that portrait there?
I was looking around. We're not allowed to see very much of the hotel, so I didn't see very much of the hotel. I can't really say I did a good once over.
Yeah, they tried to take the media on a tour, but only the camera, because they didn't want any questions, which was also interesting. All right,
All right, we need to track that damn painting down, because wherever that painting is right now, if it's on Trump properties, they're dead. And even if it's somewhere else, we need to find out exactly when it got to its present location and where it came from, okay? So if it came from, again, a Trump property to a, let's say it is a charitable organization, we need to know when it got there, okay, and how it's currently being used, because it's just a damn portrait.
Add Scott Maxwell of the Orlando Sentinel and Dan Gelber, former U.S. Attorney and former Florida State Senator. Thank you both for being here. And Scott, you actually initiated much of the coverage that we now see, particularly on the Bondi side of things. Her office has vigorously denied that there was anything untoward in that combination of donation from the Trump Foundation to her PAC and their decision not to investigate Trump University. Very quickly, the New York Times did an analysis of the Bondi check that, in a sense, sort of threw a little bit of cold water on the timeline. The New York Times says the documents obtained this week, including a copy of Mr. Trump's check, at least partly undercut the timeline. They said that on September 9, 2013, Donald J. Trump signed a check from his foundation, which is to And Justice for All, a political committee supporting Pam Bondi. The contribution appeared to be on its way before Ms. Bondi's office said publicly that it was reviewing complaints about Trump's for-profit educational company, Trump University. What do you make of that, Scott?
Yeah, I think the timeline is sort of a red herring, because they can talk about September 9th, but I found internal emails that I just revealed yesterday from her office as early as August 30th, where every single top member of her staff is talking about people in Florida complaining about Trump University. Not to mention the New York Times itself had written stories in mid-August about the Attorney General in New York going after Trump University and saying in those stories that Florida is one of the other key states that it's going to be looking at. But I got to tell you, a lot of this stuff just seems like chasing rabbits to me. If you go back, we're sort of trying to make people run in a bunch of different directions. You go back to the key facts, which is what I've tried to stay focused on here. It's this. The lead prosecutor in Florida was asked to investigate someone. She then took $25,000 from that someone. I got to tell you, there aren't a whole lot of prosecutors who I think are going to look you in the eye and say, no, that's good ethical business. That's the way we should do things.
And David, really quickly, were you able to determine whether the Trump Foundation, quote, accidentally gave money to any other attorney general? We know that Donald Trump did donate to the Texas Attorney General, who says there's no connection between that donation and his decision not to investigate Trump University. But did you find any of these other mistaken donations?
Not from the Trump Foundation. I've looked at the Trump Foundation and haven't found it. When Trump gave to the other attorney generals, he gave out of his own pocket. Just as one interesting thing from that process, their explanation for why the Trump Foundation paid Bondi's group was that because its name sounded like the name of a real charity in Utah, the Trump's accounts payable clerks got confused, and since all money that went to charities came out of the Trump Foundation, they wrote the check out of the Trump Foundation. Now, how the check then got to Florida and not to Utah, we haven't had that explained.
Yeah, and Dan Gelber, Pam Bondi's explanation, other than to just take absolute umbrage, anyone would question her about this, is that her office never even considered investigating Trump University. But from Scott and other reporting, it does seem that Florida was one of at least the top 5, if not the top 3 states in which Trump University complaints were being made.
And he had a very substantial presence in Florida. I mean, listen, you all are talking, the standard you're using really isn't the standard. The truth of the matter is, in August of 2013, the Attorney General of New York charged Trump University with being essentially a fake university. Those are Marco Rubio's words, but really for being a fraudulent scheme, a boiler room operation with all of the indicia and elements of a boiler room operation, high pressure, game plans, scripts, all that. And Texas had also looked at it. So Trump knew, and Bondi knew, everybody knew that this place was at risk for being investigated and prosecuted. And the fact that they didn't take an action doesn't take them out of a problem here, because an inaction, a decision not to prosecute, which is the best thing for Trump University, I suspect, is an action. And I think so. This idea that somehow this timeline changed anything, Pam Bondi took a $25,000 check from someone that people in Florida believed had ripped them off, and that's the end of the story. She should have returned the money. It was a terrible mistake for her to keep it. Yeah. But more than that, Donald Trump wrote that check knowing that this attorney general could be looking at him, and there were complaints there. That's, to me, the great thing. This guy is going to, if he's president, going to nominate 93 U.S. attorneys across this country. So that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish we had lots more time to talk about this. David Fahrenthold, Scott Maxwell, Dan Gelber. I hope you guys will all come back. Thank you very much.
All right, so I mean that's the real pay for play. Donald Trump has said numerous times that he gives politicians money so that when he needs something, he calls them up and they kiss his ass. His exact words. Apparently he gave Pam Bondi $25,000 and she kissed his ass, plain and simple.